Welcome back to another episode of Hopper's Hot Rods. Let me explain to you why you should never, ever hire Hopper's Hot Rods to work on your vehicle. I put some things in upside down. I ran the engine completely out of oil again, and we're going to do some work on the trailer. The front end needs upper bearing joint something, I'm not sure. There's some stuff going on the front end we're going to take a quick look at. Let's put the van up in the air and take off the exhaust. Cue. Let's start with the trailer. If you're going to work on a trailer or work in and around it, put some jack stands and some scissor jacks under it so you can tighten it up and it won't wibble wobble forward, backward, move around while you're working on it. It's just a safety thing. Now, what we got going on inside, well, let me sit down the camera and I'll show you. Hey, here's what we got. I've got some of this track. I grabbed two pieces from Northern Harbor Freight, Hobo Freight. Yeah. And I had a couple of pieces already that came out of another vehicle. That's why I went with this little system here. But before I attach it to the wall of the van, I cut some strips of 3/8 plywood because that's what it kind of looks like wainscoting. I'll bring you in for a closer look. So it won't have any difference in elevation. The plane will be, and this will spread out the pulling. If I just screw this to the side, I'm just screwing into one piece of 3/8 plywood. I double it up like this and spread it out a little bit and glue this. It makes a more rigid long strip, and I can use some lag bolts and it won't pull out as easily. I'm sure it's still possible, but I'm not moving that much heavy stuff. I just want to overbuild it a little bit. So I cut all these strips. Like so. I'm gonna slather the back with glue. I went ahead and put screws about 2 inches up. So I'll just screw them in place, but not all the way. Then that's my guide to put these on. Cut one to fit, and the other one I got laying in here. And so I'm sure there's some place that you can order these or pick them up in 10-foot strips. When I asked at Harbor Freight, I said, do you have this in 10 foot? The kid behind the counter said, let me check. Oh, we have it in 12. He went to the wall, came back with a 12-inch piece. Bless his heart, he tried. Anyhow, so I've got these pieces for the left side. I've got these pieces for the right side, except to trim one down, and then I'll show you how this goes. I set these screws at about 29 inches high so I could set this board just on the heads of these screws that I have along here. And you'll see the plywood I got is 3/8, and that's the same thickness as that. That's about, I guess, 5 mil for my European viewers. And the board's like 9 inches. This is like 5 inches. So these other screws, once I put them on top of this and push these in, I just won't screw them in all the way. We can set the track on the heads of these screws and start screwing the track in. And that's really what's going to hold it all together. Squish the glue and make everything lovely. There we are. We got the plywood in place and we got the tracks in place, and they're looking pretty good. I've got the track coming right to the edge of the door on this side, and not all the way to this front bulkhead on this side, but I'll explain that in a minute. it was more important to me to make sure that that little mark there was the same as the center of this one here, and I will tell you why. The reason these tracks are so handy is you have lots of attachment points, but they also make a lot of attachments for this thing, one of which is this guy here. And it's just a ring that you can put anywhere you want, so you can attach one of your collection of straps to it. And they just lock in place and they have a quick release. They're really nice. And I've got a strap that is already designed for it. They sell cargo straps that have the ends built in that just clip directly in. But I only have one of those, and I'm not going to buy a bunch of these because you can only use them with this. Use these, they're only a couple bucks, and you can use any strap you want. But then I also found they have this little guy here, which is pretty handy, and it's essentially a little pocket that'll hold a 2x4. So anywhere along the trailer, I can put a 2x4 or a 2x6 all the way across and partition off part of the trailer if I've got something that looks like it'll all slide to the back, or if I'm going up hills, or something that'll fall forward. I just think these are a cool idea. So let's just try these on, and then I'll do we'll just try them on. All right, through the magic of quick editing, I've got a 2x4. And from the little trim piece, we're right at 24. And on this side, from the trim piece, we are right at 24. And it doesn't matter if it was off just an inch or two this way or that way, but if you're gonna do it right. So you could also just grab a couple of deck screws, screw a 2x4 to the bottom, have this, put on a couple of pieces of plywood, and have a small trailer to fill with whatever. Makes it well, I guess whatever you need this for. Went ahead and labeled it trailer crossbar, so I don't accidentally use it for something else. Got a whole box of these lag screws, and every 6 inches, top and bottom, I'm going to pre-drill with this drill bit and install the lag screws through the plywood every 6 inches on both sides. So everything's held tight together to the plywood. I'll add a couple of more screws to the plywood to metal. Let me show you those. These screws are designed with a little drill bit at the end and a finer thread. So they drill through the wood, then they drill through the metal and tap themselves into the metal. And I'm going to put one of these above and below each of the metal struts that hold the plywood to the thing, just to add a little more. And then we'll move over to the van. Dropping oil on bay 1. Oh yeah, still just me. I think it would behoove us to attempt an ambitious couple of little projects, because I got an inspection and code enforcement informs me that I need to unbolt my lift and move it to the left like 600 miles. So while we have use of the lift, this will be the last time I get to use it for a minute, I'm going to go ahead and service this front end that I've been meaning to do for a little while, and maybe make those adjustments on the exhaust I've been wanting to do. I've got the oil draining. While that's getting all empty, we'll make a list. Oh, the best. You tell me if it's ambitious. We got 2 days probably. Gonna change the oil. We're already halfway through with that project. Crankcase vent, I'll go over that with you in a minute because something's going on there. Brake pads, because we're going to go ahead and change the rotors. The other pads are grooved up from the rotors that are on there, so we're going to change both of those. Bearings and seals, since we're changing the rotors, we might as well put new inner and outer bearings and seal. The upper ball joints have never been changed on this one, I don't think. So we're going to check that. I'm pretty sure they need to be changed. I'm going to try changing the springs because I cut these with a grinding wheel and they're just a little, they kind of bottom out. Anyhow, we'll look at that. Since we're changing the upper ball joints, we'll have it all apart. That'd be a good time to at least look at that. Grease everything. I put rear end fluid. I know it's oil, but it's still a viscous fluid. And then we'll put on a new exhaust system. That should fill up a day or two. Let's discuss this crankcase situation. As I was driving, I kept noticing oil on top of the AC, and it was coming from the dipstick tube. Now, that will happen if there's a ton of pressure in the crankcase, and I went to a lot of trouble to put this vent with a nice size hose straight to the big vent on the valve cover. And then I have this catch can pulling vacuum on the back of the other valve cover. So why would I be getting pressure in the crankcase? I don't know, but when I stopped and checked the oil, there's nothing on the dipstick. Oil was spewing out and it was everywhere down here. So I took the oil cap off and zip tied a paper towel over the fill, and that stopped the problem immediately. So the crankcase is not venting correctly. Good thing I spent 80 bucks on catch cans and crap and hoses and tried my best to do it. And the only thing I can think of is maybe because these valve covers were 60 bucks, maybe the vents aren't knocked out. Maybe you're supposed to drill them out yourself for however you want them venting. Maybe they're not venting at all or not significantly. So I went ahead and took the wheels off so we can get to our hubs. We're going to change out these hubs and the bearings and the seals and the brake pads. And the upper ball joints have never been changed on this because they're riveted on. And this vehicle is from the 80s, so I believe it's time to do that. I remember doing the bottom because I had put urethane bushings on. So we'll go ahead and knock these out, and then we'll check out these springs also. Do yourself a little favor and grab a paint pen and write the mileage, 24,000, and the date on your oil filter. So if you wake up dead, somebody else knows, you know, what's going on with the vehicle. You're not going to be able to see this, but I'm going to show you anyway. This is the bearing race. Now, when you buy bearings, if you buy a decent quality one, like this Timken bearing, it comes with its own race. That's the part that is pressed in that the bearing rides around on, like so. These are little tapered roller bearings. You can just put this in here and rock and roll. The races that come with the bearings are the ones you should probably use in the thing. So we're going to knock these out. The upper and lower have a race. That's the race for the lower. And so to knock them out, you just get a nice long drift punch and you put it right on the little ledge there, and you start knocking the crap out of it. Work your way around, and you'll feel it moving a little at a time, and then it drops out the bottom. When you flip it over, we'll do the top. So I'll do that real quick, and then I'll show you how we install the new races before we put the seals in and And that's our no-name whatever race is knocked out, and we can now install the new races in these two spots here. And that is achieved in the traditional way by just getting it lined up and just getting it started, and then we employ the rental tool that we get from O'Reilly's to you can use a press, but this will work just fine. Inner bearings in, the grease seals pounded in. Now I can go return the bearing driver thing to O'Reilly's, and we will continue on from there. I went and returned the rental tool, the bearing driving set, and now I'm just giving this a quick wipe. We're going to degrease it really nicely with brake parts cleaner before we assemble everything. Also, before we even start taking everything off the other vehicle, just so we don't assume that we have things right, you can grab a lug nut and make sure you got the right size and length studs so you don't put it on there and then your wheel won't go on, just in case something got screwed up with the order. I already checked that one. We're just going to make sure that this is the right size also. Looks perfect. Now we can go ahead and take the pin out, take the other one off, put this on right. We're going to give it a try. You just don't want to render your vehicle undrivable and not have the parts to put it back together. I know I could go ahead and replace the rotor with what I've taken apart so far. However, this thing makes a noise when you go left, just a little gently. And if you go left gradually through a turn, it feels like the wheel's going to fall off. Now, I don't know why that is. I have some hopes that a visual inspection of everything involved in the suspension and bearings will expose the problem, but it is likely an exercise in futility, and futility is my middle name. Sometimes people over dramatize these procedures. To remove the spring, you put a little load on the suspension, and you'll watch right here. I've already broken this loose, and when this gap closes up just a little bit, like that, I can reach in, take this bolt off, and they say, be careful because the spring could fly across the room and take your eye out. And that might be true in some cases, but most of the time, it's a little more like this. There you go. Well, here's the old spring, here's the new spring. They are pretty similar. Same number of coils and everything, except for this part where someone, okay, me, sliced it off with a cutoff wheel to make it a little lower. I think there was one more curly Q on these, because I don't know why I would have cut off just from here to here. It seems like I would have cut it off even so that the index on the lower A arm, which is right here, you can feel there's an indentation for the bottom of the spring to sit, for the end of the spring. But I don't know. New springs going on. we'll clean all this up and assemble it and see how it does. This is the upper ball joint. I think there may be play in this thing. I can't really feel any. It's very stiff. It doesn't look like it's been lubricated correctly through the years. And these rivets indicate that this is the original upper ball joint from the 80s. So let me just see if I can pry this off. Now I can get the rivets down to the correct level. I wonder what that was for. No idea. This rubber bump stop that lives in between these two was preventing me from getting a good whack on the rivet shaft here after I've cut the head off. So I jammed a 2x4 in there, and I still can't seem to get a satisfying pound on this thing. So I'm going to grab an air chisel with a point and see if I can just zip it out that way, and if not, we can always drill it. As is often the case with these things, this is admittedly a pretty light duty, cheapy little air hammer with the pointy end on it, but it drove that out with no problem. This is what the other end of it looks like. And as usual, it takes 30 minutes to do the first one and about 5 minutes a piece to do the rest of them. So I'll get on these, both sides, and we will reconvene with the new parts. Well, I've cleaned up and scuffed up and shot a little spray paint on the calipers because they were getting rusty, and I meant to paint them before I installed them the first time. Here is the new ball joint, and upon close inspection of the one I took off on both sides, they looked perfectly fine. So no surprise there. We'll install the new ones right here. A little grease fitting goes there. Let me grab some hardware and get this thing bolted on. This one, instead of having the rivets, just has, you know, bolts and lock washers and nuts. I'm putting them on this way with the nuts on top because it didn't say any different in the instructions, and truthfully I don't know any better, so as far as I know, this is the way it should be done. There we are, nice and tight. Well, the thing's nice and stiff. We will grease this thing up and reassemble everything. Looking kind of shiny in there now. We got some new springs, new upper ball joints, fresh grease. There's a split in this grease boot. Need to replace that someday, but at least it's full of grease now. All greased up. Make sure you grease these things too on both ends. Now, all you need to put brakes on is a C-clamp to compress that piston. I'll show you that when I'm putting it together, I guess. Now I can put the dust cover back on. We'll clean up the new rotors, make sure they're degreased because they come greasy so they won't rust. See, just a little bit of surface rust forms very quickly unless they're treated, but you don't want them treated when you put them on because then all that will get on your new brake pads. Before I put the dust cover on, just protects your brake rotor from rocks and stuff, I'm gonna put a little dab of blue Loctite on the bolts just in case. Well, the last thing you would want is one of these bolts to just vibrate and back out and wedge in between your brakes and your rotor. This is what I'm talking about. It's got a glaze of some kind of anti-rusting, oily something on it. So I'm going to hit it first with a little degreaser, a bit of the old brake parts cleaner. see more stuff come off. There's a little more light, which should make a distracting shadow. And we just slip this on and try not to throw the bearing onto the ground. I say try not to. Just need to find that little keyway, which is there, and get this started. And get this started. And get this. What the hell am I doing wrong here? Take 22. Now that the bearing is gently seated in place, we can get this started. And just spin it down. Now I'll pause and do some stuff. When you find that natural stopping point, you'll just put the cotter pin in the position just before that, because the metal will expand when heat is generated. I'm reusing this, so welcome back, cotter pin. Bending the cotter pin over is a pretty simple operation there. There's probably a right way to do it, but that looks fine to me. And when you replace the dust cap, you don't want to just smack it with a hammer, because you can dent the crap out of them. So most DIYers will have a set of hole saws, and you can just use one of those and drive her home. Nice. The brake caliper slides back and forth on these two little bushings back here, and there's two O-rings here that slide on this. The threaded portion of this is threaded only to the spindle, so the brake caliper moves freely on the bolt. Now I've already lubed this up a little bit, and I just use, you don't have to get the high dollar brake grease, which it's fine if you do. But if you have dielectric grease or any silicone based high temperature lubricant, that's really all that stuff is, and that works just fine for the life of the brakes. But it needs to be silicone based and high temperature. So a premium dielectric grease is a perfectly good option. The brakes will be done for now. Let's see what we've done so far. We've not done the crankcase vent, but we did do brake pads, rotors, bearings, seals, ball joints, yes, yes, yes. Springs, both of them, 1, 2. Grease is the word. Haven't done that, haven't done that, haven't done that. And I took the battery out to go do a roadside rescue. That won't be on the channel because I didn't film it, but it was fun. Now listen, I was working on this thing really hoping to find a smoking gun as to the noise and the steering issues, and I didn't even find a warm knife. Everything looked fine. I went ahead and replaced all the stuff that I had, so we'll see if there's any difference in we will turn our attention to the crankcase ventilation issue forthwith. Oh yeah, this camera can accentuate my fat belly. Take 22. In an effort to combat the positive crankcase pressure that I've got going on, I've enlisted the help of a Moroso, I guess you would call it a scavenging kit. Moroso is a hot rod brand, been around for a while, and this kit that they sell comes with some grommets, which apparently fit really well on there. Little rubber grommets that'll fit into breathers that you have to drill holes for. It comes with these valves, which are directional. Inside there's a diaphragm, so air can only go one direction through, and it's this direction. Air can only go through them this direction. And the way it works is 2 valves. It's got these little guys, and it's just a piece of pipe that's cut at a specific angle, and it's got this sort of whistle looking deal to it and some pipe threads. And you drill a hole in your exhaust pipe, well, presumably 2 holes. This goes into the exhaust pipe in such a way that when the exhaust gases pass through, it creates a draw or Venturi effect sort of, and creates a vacuum and pulls air through this direction. So you would just have air that could leak into your exhaust system but not out. And this tube connects to the breather on your engine, thereby creating a negative pressure in your crankcase. And the higher you rev, the greater the vacuum, which of course you would need a little more vacuum as you generate more blow-by gases and create more crankcase pressure. So we're gonna drill a little hole, weld this into the exhaust, and we may only put in 1 right now because I've only got until tomorrow to get ready to leave. So that only gives me about 3 days to get everything ready. We're going shaky cam, I apologize. Oh, look at the shiny new springs. I still haven't put it on the ground and put weight on it, so I don't know if it's gonna sit terribly or not. But let's look at the places we could install our exhaust scavenging things here. The O2 sensors are way up here by the engine. Probably anywhere along this will be fine. So I'm inclined to just put 1 here and 1 here and run the hoses accordingly. That's it's probably 2 feet back, something like that. I'm going to put dual exhaust on this thing someday, and that'll probably start right here to the crossover and then on back. So I wouldn't have to change those if I got them right around this area. Yep, that seems like a reasonable spot to put those. Drilled a couple of holes, connected the 2 with a unibit, which is that thing that's on the drill over there. Now I'm using a die grinder to try to get the angle correct. That's probably good. We'll check it with a protractor, but we just need to make sure we get that part sunken in at about a 45 degree. I think that's probably pretty close. Before you weld, you might want to hit everything with a grinder, make sure it's nice and clean. Here's our little piece of thing that will go in here. And make sure it's at a 45, and that would be fine to weld right there. And it looks like it's fairly well straight with the pipe too. Luckily, I have one of these cool little magnet things, which I wasn't sure if it was going to work. Let me set my depth where I want it and line it up like that and like that. Look how nice that is. Here's our little scavenger. I wrapped it with some Teflon tape, and this thing you can only blow through it one direction. It's just got a little diaphragm in there. I don't even know if you can see this. And it's really easy to blow through it this way, so any crankcase pressure will go this direction. And hopefully, being downhill, any oil will just go into the exhaust. Come on, let's get you started. So we'll just get this thing snugged down, and then we will run some heater hose from both sides up to the vent, which we have not yet figured out how we're going to put on. You should be able to see without too much trouble. Here's our scavenger, here's our valve, here's our hose, and it runs neatly without any kinks or binding over the top of the transmission, where it then intersects our T-fitting here and falls back into this area here. And this is pointed directly towards the passenger side of the engine compartment, where we will hopefully gain our ventilation this direction. On the plus side, I now have a way of hitting the road. I'm just not crazy about it. This fits in the original oil cap fit place snugly, not super snugly, but snugly enough that I could just run the hose to this and zip tie it. But I kind of hate this. I'd like to be able to put the regular oil fill cap back on, and I kind of don't want it to be at such a harsh angle so oil might pool up in here. I'd like it to be more to where oil could drain out of it. Mounted maybe somewhere where these two hose clamps are, perhaps for now. So I'm going to take this apart, see what I've got laying around to make a way to attach this to this right here. But if I don't, at least I can shove this in here, stick the hose on there, and rock and roll. So we've completed it. Now we're just going to try to refine it a little bit. Made a trip to Lowe's and got a brass tee. It's the biggest one they had. Some hose clamps, some 7/8 garbage disposal hose, and it squeezed over the pipe that was on the oil fill. And here's our breather cap connected. This hose runs all the way back down to our exhaust scavenging thing. So now it's just a matter of clipping off a few cable ties with the flush cutters that we use here, and that doesn't leave a little thing sticking out that'll tear your flesh. Vented. Let's see, got the battery reconnected. Probably not going to do the whole exhaust system, but we will check the rear end fluid and the driver's window before we take it off the lift. Figured out what was wrong. Well, one thing that was wrong inside the door is that bracket is broken. That kind of copper colored bracket. I thought about trying to bridge it with a piece of steel to pull it back in place, but it doesn't seem to be too critical. It's not making any noise, and after lubricating everything, it rolls down and rolls back. Well, how about that? There goes the light. It seems to roll back up reasonably well. It's still a little tight right at the top. I just decided to lubricate everything. Everything's so rusty and crusty in there, but it is from the 80s. We also checked this. And the only thing we didn't do is build a new dual exhaust system, but that was an elective, not a compulsory. It's not a huge amount, but it sits up a bit higher in the front. Yeah, I work in my bathrobe on a vehicle sometimes. I forgot to pack any sweatshirts. It got chilly. What do you want me to say? Like you never work on vehicles in your bathrobe? Well, you probably don't. Keep in mind, this is a daily driver / work truck that just looks cool. So sitting up an extra little bit in the front is fine. This thing gets driven over curbs and off the road. It's not just for cruising to Sonic on the weekends. I think we actually made some successful progress. This thing's getting dangerously close to the cosmetics section where I can touch up the paint, fix the front end, put the fog lights back right, clean it up nice. Probably not. Something will break. Remember our motto here at Hopper's Hot Rods: we're not happy until you're not happy. Thank you for watching.